Hi, and welcome to Spectrum Projection, a media review podcast where we analyse characters who may fit into the autism spectrum. I'm Hannah, an actually autistic person with a master's in literature, focusing on the analysis of disability in fiction and in memoir.
And I'm Tilda, and this podcast may or may not contain gays. We'll never tell.
Trigger warnings in the description. Hi, how's it going?
Well, you know.
This has been a wild week. Like, we are recording this, just after that beginning of November. So things are still pretty wild. And I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's been a lot. I'm still processing it. I mean, I'm still processing this weird feeling I'm having where it's like this weird thing where I'm not constantly feeling like it's the end of the world.
Yeah, it's a nice reminder
it's not
of what
necessarily
it was
like, good, but I'm not constantly running away from the dread inside of myself.
Yeah, I can actually watch the news again.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
I mean, I'm not gonna, because...
Yeah, fuck that. But
I
could if I wanted to. But yeah, it's also, if you're in fandom circles, been a really wild week for a completely opposite bunch of reasons.
Oh yeah, the main reasons why we can't tell you about whether or not we're gay is because we'll be sent to turbo hell or whatever.
Oh god, yeah. So anyone who's listening to this who isn't into a very specific subsection of fandom, we're gonna sound insane. And it is relevant to this week's topic.
We are insane. I think this week has driven, or these couple of weeks have driven pretty
this
much...
whole year.
I mean, that goes without saying.
But this is specifically in reference to a phenomenon called super Sherlock. And you might be thinking, what the fuck is that? And if you're not thinking
you can't go into super Sherlock. Actually, Supernatural, a show that I didn't think people still cared about.
For the most part, no. A couple of diehards who I feel sorry for.
Bless their silly little hearts.
But if they enjoy it, they enjoy it. I can't really judge them for that. I enjoy so much garbage.
I do feel sorry for them. But anyway, after, decade plus...
It started in 2005, so 15 years.
Basically, they stopped queerbaiting, but only to send one of the characters to turbo hell. I've only seen that, one scene, so I don't know any of the context. I've only seen, the guy... teary-eyed, confessing his love to Mr. fucking, I don't know,
Yeah, the worst performance I've ever seen.
And then he gets enveloped in goo.
Yeah, and I'm bringing this up because, what Super Sherlock is, it's a crossover between Supernatural and Doctor Who and Sherlock, which is what we're talking about today.
BBC Sherlock specifically.
BBC's 2012 version of Sherlock, which is garbage. I'm sorry, teenage Hannah.
You're not even gonna lead into it. You're just gonna go directly.
No, I can't. It's a thing of if you liked this show when it was coming out, if you watch it again now, it has aged like milk. It's so bad.
I think we should make clear that both of us separately, because we didn't know each other back then, were fans of this show when it was first coming out. I was around for the first 2 seasons, and then I kind of dropped off in that long hiatus.
You had the best experience you could have had of the show.
Yeah.
Because the first 2 seasons still had promise. I need to make some confessions about myself, and maybe these are going to be a little identifiable, but I was very, very, very big in the Sherlock fandom, to the point where I had, I think, in the top 5 blogs on Tumblr for Sherlock.
Wow, brag much?
Oh, not a brag. Fucking shame. I published 3 books related to Sherlock Holmes off the back of Sherlock. The first one was specifically Sherlock, but after that, it was more general Sherlock Holmes, which I still adore, and I refuse to apologise for that. As much as I hate Sherlock, it did get me into Sherlock Holmes, which is a thing I can never fucking take back. It's not a fair thing. But, why are we saying that we hate Sherlock so much?
I don't know why.
Well, there's a lot of reasons, and most of them you will find in what I consider absolutely essential viewing for anybody who wants to, look at Sherlock in any sort of serious way. There is a YouTube video by a YouTuber, H-Bomber guy.
It's Sherlock is garbage, and here's why.
But yeah, Sherlock is just bad in many, many ways if you care about any
If you want a general summary of the problems with this show, H-Bomber guy's video is very good. Don't watch that now, watch our thing.
Yeah, it's a really long video, and I promise our thing will probably be shorter.
I don't know that it will.
We're only talking about 1 episode of this show, as is our usual method. We are talking about Series 2, Episode 2, Hounds of Baskerville. This makes it so mad.
Sorry, I just love that. The thing, we watched this together and like we were, kind of bored and irritated the whole way through. And the thing that like made Hannah rant at me for days was the title of the episode.
Look,
will you explain to our dear listeners at home why the title of this episode makes you so angry?
So, BBC Sherlock is really obsessed with modernising all the stories, which I have no problem with on a conceptual level. But the way they're modernising is to try and be like, we're nothing like the originals, so they make all the titles slightly different. So they make Study in Scarlet, they make it into Study in Pink, they make Scandal in Bohemia to Scandal in Belgravia. Whatever, fine. Those things I can kind of take track with. They take Hound of the Baskervilles and they just switch the S on the words. That's so fucking lazy, and it doesn't even work with what happens in the fucking story they tell, because there's one dog. There aren't multiple dogs, and there's more than one Baskerville. It makes no sense.
But Hannah, aren't like the hounds the scientists that did whatever they were doing in that episode? It's already slipped out of my brain.
Yeah, we watched this maybe 3-4 days ago. I have it burned into my brain because unfortunately it was a hyperfixation of mine, which means I can probably quote most episodes word for word.
Watching it, I realized that I probably only ever saw this episode like once, and that was like when I was 14. So I do not remember anything other than like the shipping moments and Watson finds people having sex in a car at one point. Everything else, like, I had forgotten, and I still don't remember anything else because...
That's a lie, Tilda, because there are so many memes that came out of this episode. I'm sure you remember at least some of the freeze frames people took of Benedict Cumberbatch's face from this particular episode.
No, yeah, but I count that as, like, the shipping stuff, because a lot of it was just that.
Yeah, to make it clear, I will do all our usual instruction stuff. This episode aired on the 8th of January, 2012. I feel like I'm a fucking mummy. I feel ancient. It was written by Mark Gatiss, who, if you're wondering who the British man I said I hated so much last time was, it's not Mark Gatiss. Mark Gatiss I can kind of be okay with, because he's written some books I really enjoy. The guy I do hate is Stephen Moffat. Stephen Moffat is the creator of this show, and he is the worst thing that's ever happened to Doctor Who, a massive misogynist, and an awful human being. And
also, I mean, tangent, but that's our thing now.
Yeah.
Possibly one of the worst vampires things ever.
Oh god, yeah.
Dracula was so bad.
Yeah, we watched it out of morbid curiosity because as bad as we think this episode of Sherlock is, the very last episode they aired is genuinely...
The last episode of Sherlock is clownishly terrible. It's so bad that the fandom invented a conspiracy theory. Or not, let's be fair, not the entire fandom. Like a very extreme subset of the fandom invented a theory that included the idea that this episode was purposely written to be bad. The biggest fans of this show had to like justify the episode being terrible. They couldn't like pretend that it was good. They had to make up a conspiracy theory where the writers deliberately wrote an awful episode.
I will say, I feel like it's very hard for us to be objective about this fandom and this particular show because of my personal experiences with them.
Yeah.
Not to go into a ton of detail, but I'm not somebody who ships characters. I don't really care if characters get together very often. It's very rare that I give a damn about that, especially if it's something that the writers clearly have no intention of engaging with in any level. So, for me, I was fairly outspoken about the fact it's like, you guys have fun, I don't really care about it. And I was still coming to terms with like my own sexuality. It turns out I'm ace.
You told them you're going to Turbo Hell.
Oh no! Aces don't go to Turbo Hell, they go to Turbo Purgatory. But like... I was coming to terms with my own asexuality in Sherlock Holmes, as well as being a very well-known autistic character, which was something I was also coming to terms with. He's also a character a lot of people hold up as asexual, and it does come up in one of the episodes of this show, and they do handle it fucking terribly.
Of course they do.
But when I said that, hey, maybe this character is asexual, I got such a level of backlash that I was doxxed, and people got my personal details. People were just incredibly abusive, sending me death threats. It's a part of my fandom experience that has made me very hesitant to engage with fandom ever again.
And it needs to be said, the blog you were running an Ask blog that was like answering questions about deductions.
No, it was not BBC Sherlock specific at all.
Yeah, it was just a cute blog about, how
How you can tell if someone's a plumber from their hands, or how you can tell what hand someone writes with using these signs and stuff. Just simple observational stuff.
And the crime for which Hannah was, condemned to high fandom treason was saying that Sherlock could be ace.
Or the very, because I didn't even have a terminology for that at that point. I didn't even know that ace was a thing. My thing was, what if Sherlock and Watson didn't get together? I think that would probably be a better outcome from them. And this episode is a really good example of that.
Oh, are we actually tangenting into the thing we were actually supposed to be talking about?
Yes, and I know this is an autism-specific angle that we're going to be approaching this from, but to understand the kind of complex issues this show has with the things it implies about characters, it's going to come up the queerbaiting. It's going to come up with the asexual hinting, I guess. The queerbaiting's a lot worse at this point. If you don't know what queerbaiting is, I just realised that not all our listeners may know what queerbaiting is.
Yeah.
In the term.
Okay, so can I take this one? Because
go ahead.
It's a subject that kind of interests me, I guess.
It's not a thing that I know that much about because, again, this experience was bad enough that I bailed pretty hard on fandom.
Basically, queerbaiting is a relatively recent term. There are things that have been labeled queerbaiting posthumously, which I don't necessarily agree with. But this idea that some shows will use fandom's propensity, is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Propensity to ship things, specifically same-sex characters, to drum up interest in their show. But they don't want to make those characters actually gay because that's going to alienate, homophobes.
And the majority of their audience in their eyes, because their audience to them is the same as the writers, who are usually people who don't have any sort of connection to the LGBT community.
Yeah.
Which sometimes they do, but also they do have their hands tied by networks and all this kind of bullshit. Assigning blame when it comes to queerbaiting is very hard to do. In the case of BBC Sherlock, I would say at least some of the blame falls on Stephen Moffat for actively reviling the fandom to their faces, which only intensified the beliefs of everyone that it would happen eventually.
Yeah, and I guess the sort of big issue with queerbaiting, I don't mean issue as in that there's a problem with the concept of talking about queerbaiting, but being able to identify whether or not something is queerbaiting is that people can very easily make excuses for the shows that are accused of queerbaiting and saying, oh, the writers never intended that, you're reading too much into it. Mm-hmm. In this particular case with Sherlock, I don't think you can make that accusation, because the jokes about John and Sherlock, I almost said John and Watson, John and Sherlock being gay are constant, especially in the first two seasons.
Yeah, and
we were talking about Supernatural earlier, and that's another show that gets accused of queerbaiting a lot. Well, now they can't anymore technically because they did the thing and then sent one of the characters to Turbo Hell.
Yeah, but 4 episodes before the end, they made it actually gay, so they couldn't have the main criticism they had, which was they were horribly queerbaiting. That's also a cop-out, and if Sherlock and John had kissed at the end of the last episode, it wouldn't have salvaged any of the queerbaiting they'd already done, in my opinion. I know that's a personal thing to a lot of people, but I think it takes more than just somebody having a gay label on them for it to be good representation.
The whole last minute queers, or 1 second that you can cut out for the Chinese audience.
Yeah, it's a pretty big problem.
That's a whole other issue. Queerbaiting is one thing, and then you have the Disney thing where they would have a millisecond of 2 characters of the same sex or same gender holding hands, but it's very deliberately edited so that you can cut it out for different markets.
Yeah, it's a pretty prominent issue, and it's not one that's necessarily massively germane to our topic here, but queerness and autism are things that are surprisingly
We're going to say
interlinked.
queerness, by the way, because,
I am ace. I fall under the queer umbrella. It is a term that I identify with. And if that's a thing that makes you uncomfortable, it's part of the actual literature of talking about these ideas in literature. It's called queer studies. It's an academic term and a reclaimed term, so I'm afraid we are going to use it.
I mean, I'm not afraid, because I understand that some people, this is going to make me sound really mean, but I am queer, and I kind of am tired of the whole discussion around whether or not this is a slur, because every time it comes up, in my experience, you can always trace it back to, some kind of, usually transphobia, but,
some kind of exclusionism.
Yeah.
Because queer is an umbrella term for a lot of different people, and a lot of the time people don't like it because it includes so many kinds of people.
Yeah, because it's a label that doesn't necessarily require you to put yourself in a tiny little box. I am this specific thing, and I will be this thing for the rest of eternity. Mm-hmm. But anyway,
but yeah, what we're saying is the queer analysis of Sherlock is something that you could do, Personally, it is a thing that we will mention a few times because this episode is pretty well known for having a few moments of obvious queerbaiting. And to be honest, it's kind of surprising to me watching this again and realising that there are moments of good in it, because I'm going to skip the intro because it's pointless. There's like a flashback to Henry Baskerville seeing his dad die by being killed by a dog.
Or rather, being killed by a shaky cam.
Yeah, it's the worst editing I've ever seen in my goddamn life. It's so try-hard, it's so over the top. If you have sensory issues, I'm genuinely saying you might not be able to watch this because it is so needlessly overwhelming.
This entire episode has so many bits in it where it's just trying so hard. Like, this show has been commended many times for its cinematography, and there are bits in it that are, genuinely good. Like, the one good thing that undeniably came out of Sherlock is that whole thing where, like, instead of filming someone's, like, phone screen awkwardly over the actor's shoulder with, like, a cam that's shaking slightly and you can't really see what's on the screen, having the text just appear on screen, like, a legible font, having it be still and letting you read. That is, like, genuinely a
net positive, yeah.
Great, so many things. So many shows do that now, and so many movies do that now, because it's objectively a better way of doing it. And I don't know that anyone else was doing it before Sherlock was. Everything else, apart from like a few neat transitions, is just exhausting.
Even the neat transitions a lot of the time are so excessively try-hard that they don't work as transitions because they're so distracting. But like, this is not the point. What I want to say is, because this is season 2, this is after they had a massive success that they were not expecting to be a massive success. A lot of the praise about the cinematography and editing kind of went to their heads, and you can tell by the way they edit this fucking episode. It just is so excessive. And there's a whole flashback of Henry as a kid, and he sees his dad die, blah, 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 blah. And then we do the intro. I hate the music is good. I hate it. It stands up. It should.
Yeah, the theme music is just really good still.
But my point was, another thing that stands up about it is that the chemistry between Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman...
You paused like you forgot his name there.
I mean, I'm just trying to figure out if I should say the characters or not, but I'm going to say the actors, because the characters, if I talk about their chemistry, it's going to seem like I'm endorsing whatever fucking reading people want to put on that romantic relationship, but like, the actors have a wonderful chemistry.
Yeah.
The whole scene at the beginning is like the pretty well-known one of Sherlock coming in with a bloody harpoon and saying that he couldn't get a cab.
That's one of the really funny lines in this show. He comes in with like a harpoon and he's covered in blood, and Watson or John, let's call him Watson and Holmes, say.
Yeah, I mean, if I compare it to
or
the
let's
original...
not commit, because I'm confused.
Let's not commit, and I will try not to compare it to the original books, because, long story short, the original books are just more entertaining, and this adaptation...
In your personal opinion, you mean?
Yeah, but also this adaptation is not a very good adaptation of those books, so
but
there's
anyway,
no point in me comparing.
Sherlock and Watson is like, you went like that on the tube, and Sherlock goes, none of the cabs would take me, and that still makes me laugh. I think that's a really funny exchange.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the few times where Sherlock's autism, which by the way is a very prominent thing in academics, there's a lot of people who would argue that Sherlock Holmes is autistic. It's one of the really well-known examples. Like we mentioned in our first episode about the number of characters who also present as autistic, who also have an interest in Sherlock Holmes, and a lot of that is connecting to that, disconnection from social niceties and that isolation that Sherlock Holmes has. And these scenes are the scenes that I would want if I felt like this version of Sherlock Holmes was doing a good autistic interpretation, where he is oblivious to stuff, and people do call him out on it, but he is still oblivious to it. Like, he doesn't really seem to see the issue with walking around with this blood on him and with this weapon, because it's like, well, I needed to, so... And
he's sort of, like, empowered in his obliviousness. Like, it's not just that he doesn't notice, but he doesn't care to notice.
Yeah.
Like, it can probably... If you struggle with that stuff, I imagine that it can be very freeing to see this character that doesn't care.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this scene is one of the very few scenes where I feel like there's a good counterbalance to Sherlock's bluntness. Where, like, it's clearly shown that, like, there's a consequence for him being this blunt, and not everyone will put up with it. But basically, this whole opening is weirdly mean-spirited from Sherlock, because he's quitting cigarettes, and they make it into this weird drug analogy, because they're trying to do an adaptation of the fact that the original Sherlock Holmes does drugs to help him think. And it does not work.
But it's cigarettes, it's nicotine.
Yeah, it's cigarettes, but also this Sherlock does actually do drugs, so I don't understand.
Or he used to. Like, I forget.
And he's mean to Mrs. Hudson, and, like, he's mean to everyone because he wants his cigarettes, and it's like...
And he wants a case.
He wants a case because he's bored, and it's like...
And there's that gifable moment where he's like sitting in the chair and like, you know, patting the armrests and then patting his feet on the ground. And he's like, when's the next one?
Yeah,
I've seen that gif on Tumblr. It's circa 2014.
I mean, this is the thing where it's like a lot of Benedict Cumberbatch's behaviour. And he, I think at one point did say that he was influenced by autistic acting, I guess. But I don't know how true that is. And I don't know how out of context that was taken. But like... He does do a lot of like fidgety stimming. He does do a lot of like hopping around and like twiddling his fingers and like shifting his weight from one side to the other, which is like a very common stimming pattern. So it is something that I feel like would be recognizable. But he is also just an unrepentant asshole this entire time. Like, he's so mean to Mrs. Hudson, who just came up to be like, hey, can you stop bashing around in this room because I'm not going to give you cigarettes. And it's weird because it's such
He calls her out and, oh, you're dressed up, whatever. But the guy you're seeing has a wife.
Yeah, he completely destroys her self-esteem for no reason whatsoever. I mean, the problem is with this episode is it's mostly kind of boring. Like, it's kind of hard to talk about the plots beat by beat because so many plot points are boring.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is, like...
I mean, if we're going to move on, because after, like, I think, like, 5 minutes of just Sherlock just complaining about being bored, which is a big theme for this. It's like, oh, I wish the plot would start. Mm-hmm. And they sit around in silence for, like, 2 minutes, and then the plot starts, kind of.
We need to say every episode of this show is an hour and a half.
Every episode in this show is too long.
Yeah, the original pilot was an hour, and that was the right length for these episodes. So I would argue maybe even that was a little too long for some of the ideas they pitched, but, you know, whatever. Basically, what happens is Henry Knight, now an adult, shows up in their flat, and he's played by the sweet and lovely Russell Tovey, who is a British icon. He's wonderful. He's in Being Human. He's in Doctor Who briefly, but every British actor is, so that means nothing. He basically comes in and says he's convinced that a hound killed his dad. And Sherlock is just horrible to this clearly traumatized man the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, when he's saying he wants a case, it's like his behavior is just very, like, nonsensical. He says a lot of stuff that's like, take your time but quickly, or like, I prefer to do my own editing, don't change what you're saying.
No, he doesn't take it's John saying take your time, and then Sherlock adds but quickly. So that one, I guess, makes sense. But it's still confusing. I guess in this case, it's sort of like, it seems very counterintuitive that he's being so rude to this guy. If he wants him to, you know, explain the case and like what's going on, why is he actively trying to antagonize the guy?
It's also quite explicit that it's not because he misunderstands this. It feels like he is intentionally trying to upset this guy because he's in a bad mood or whatever. But like, unlike a lot of the autistic things where people will be presented as like misstepping or misunderstanding or misreading a situation, Sherlock literally says, skipping to the night your father was violently killed.
That is definitely trying to get a rise out of the guy.
Because it's like, there's so many ways he could have worded to, like, skipping directly to the point. He didn't have to go into, like, the explicitness of violently killed. And Sherlock is frequently shown as being quite intelligent at expressing his own ideas and everything. So it's always kind of shown as a choice. Basically, he completely devastates Henry. Henry is already really messed up by seeing his dad die. And
some things that have been happening recently that made him, you know, look into this case again after all these years.
And Sherlock shows off in front of him and does all this detective stuff. It's one of the few points where they actually do some induction, deduction stuff. But a lot of it is still nonsense. Like, there's the thing about, you got a phone number from a girl, I can tell because the handwriting's distinctly feminine.
it's just like so generic. Like, for one thing, you know, you can't really tell a lot of people about people from their handwriting. And also, they actually show the handwriting on screen. And it's like, I don't know that that's particularly girly.
Yeah, it's dumb. It's really dumb. It's, you know, it's them trying to... It's one of the things that the show should focus on more, is the deduction stuff. Because that's the stuff that is the main crux of a lot of Sherlock Holmes stories. And they just don't really do it.
And I feel like that's one of the things they got really praised for in the first season. Because there are a couple of times where they, you know, do it pretty neatly.
And I would say this scene is fine. It gets a lot worse when it goes on. This one's fine. It just has a couple of weird logic loops where if you think about it too hard, you're like, hang on, wait, no? But, you know, whatever. Sherlock sniffs this guy's cigarette when he starts smoking, like gets right in his face and sniffs. And it's like, I understand...
like a snake.
I understand not understanding, like, social distance or, like, not understanding etiquette, but it is literally like a can I sniff you? he definitely
But it's
knows.
not that he
And
doesn't understand, it's that he doesn't care.
Yeah, it's very much a distinction, especially since John is there as a kind of mediator and he constantly ignores what John says to him.
John Watson is so useless in this adaptation overall. Like, he shoots the bad guy in the first episode and then he does nothing.
Yeah.
Like, in this case, it's like just lets Sherlock continuously have a go at this guy.
Yeah,
and just nothing.
And then there's also the stuff about John supposedly having post-traumatic stress disorder, which magically vanishes whenever the plot conveniently needs it to.
Which is most of the time. They barely ever mention it.
Yeah, and it's a thing that's disappointing because they very clearly wanted to talk about it in that
Because it's the first
episode.
scene in the entire show.
It is. And, like, he has a whole thing of having, like, a traumatic injury and, like, having issues with guns, but that is never brought up, and we'll talk to it later in this episode, but, like, there is a lot of stuff Sherlock does that, considering John having PTSD as a fact of this show, is beyond fucked up. It goes from being cruel to just being straight up evil. Like, it's ridiculous.
We'll get to it.
Basically, they go to Devon. For some reason, they pretend they're going to do the plot of the book and then they don't. Where in the book, Sherlock Holmes isn't in it for most of it. But in this one, they're like, well, we can't have Benedict Cumberbatch not in the episode, so I guess he will come anyway.
That bit is really confusing because it starts with they're at Baker Street and Sherlock goes, "Oh, I'll send John ahead. I'll come later because I have things I should be doing, even though I'm clearly desperate for a case." And they go, "Oh, okay." And then we kind of smash cut immediately to John and Sherlock in a car together. So never mind, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's signs of how bad it will become with the weird, like, plot direction. They go to Devon. There's a weird Bat Sherlock moment where Sherlock stands on a rock for no fucking reason.
Yeah, he climbed up this massive cliff face and just is standing there and, like, peering down at this, secret military research facility that he could easily have seen from the ground.
Yeah, it's very strange. They're really big fans of doing these, like, very impactful looking scenes. Like, the silhouette on top of this rock in the middle of this, like, Grimpen Mire or whatever is, like, a very Sherlock Holmes image. But it doesn't make any sense in this story to do it like this.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't even do any of the stuff. I'm not going to go into it because I will. I will go on a Sherlock Holmes tangent. This is a different thing. Basically, there's a whole other scene of Henry at his therapy, and now he's starting to remember random words because that's how trauma works.
Yeah.
It's like an escape room.
It's like you have, like, memories locked away and then you need to find, like, the password for your brain.
Yeah, it's... The storyline with Henry is really stupid. It's a shame because Russell Tovey really does fucking give his all.
He does. He's really good.
He's wonderful in this episode, but he is a very weak plot to work with. Sherlock and John show up at this inn that they're going to stay in with the best characters in this episode, except for Mabel Lestrade, who we do unfortunately admire.
Yeah.
They show up at this... I know it's a reference, but I can't be able to remember what it is. They show up at this inn, and it's run by these two guys who are a gay couple, the landlord and the chef, I think they are. And they make a really big deal out of this scene of, like, not a double room, we're not gay. Like,
oh yeah, because the guy at the till or desk or whatever, he assumes that they'll be needing, a room with one bed because everyone assumes that John and Sherlock are... This is so weird to me because it's a running joke in the show that everyone immediately assumes that John and Sherlock are gay because I guess everyone just has amazing gaydar and they can, like, immediately lay eyes on these two and be like, oh, they're gay. Like, with no context even. Like, this guy literally has never seen John Watson before in his entire life. And, like, second he starts talking to him, assumes that he's in a gay relationship, and it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, especially since they seem to have such an openly antagonistic relationship.
Yeah, like, again, it's like, it's so weird that this is written by a gay man. And we have this situation where a gay man blindly assumes that another man he's never seen before in his life is gay. And the guy immediately goes like, of course we'll be needing two beds. What are you talking about? And he doesn't immediately go, whoa, okay, I feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Like, if I was in that situation, if I assumed someone was, gay or same-sex attracted, and they answered with, anger,
yeah.
I would be worried about my safety.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, like, be continuing being friendly and, like, chummy with this person. I would be like, oh, I need to exit myself from this situation.
I need this guy to not be
I need to
in my
calm
building.
this straight man down before he up and murders me.
Yeah, it's like, it's a very weird thing to be in, and it's just, again, it's where the queerbaiting is such an issue, because apparently it exists within the universe of the show as well as outside of it.
Yeah.
But, a bunch of plot stuff happens. Sherlock figures out that, like, they need to go into this secret base. And the
Secret military research base, you know, the one in Devon.
Yeah, the one in Devon that's surrounded by a fucking minefield.
You know, yeah, the Devon minefield, famously.
Because, you know, BBC Sherlock's modern and cool. We can't have a Moor, you know, that Victorian symbol of emptiness and entropy. That's way too hard. We need explosions.
Hannah, it's the 2000s. There are no more Moors.
But, yeah, they have to sneak into this military base, and Sherlock does that by using his brother Mycroft's
photo ID.
Photo ID, which like literally has a photo both on the card and on the thing they scan, and no one realizes this isn't Mark Gatiss. This is ridiculous. It's honestly the thing that like broke me the most, because it's like, how stupid is this high-tech military base? It's honestly like so dumb. And honestly, a lot of the problem I have with this is like Sherlock is kind of shown to be one of these like very stereotypical autistics who are like super intelligent and super insightful and really, really cool and like whatever. But it kind of, only reason it works is because everyone else has to be dumb as shit.
That's the thing, isn't it? Like, everyone else in this universe are like just blithering morons.
I need to point out that Sherlock is also something of like a B-list celebrity at this point in the show.
Because John Watson has a WordPress blog about him.
And it's so popular that everybody knows him, and the stupid Deerstalker hat that he doesn't wear, guys. Do you get the joke? He didn't wear it in the books.
Oh, okay. I was confused for a second there. Thank you for explaining it to me.
It's dumb. Basically, they sneak into it, and like John pulls rank on someone else, and like they really emphasize, oh yeah, John used to be in the military, and there's like a bunch of nothing happens where they look around this lab and they don't find anything to do with the dog.
They get jump scared by a monkey though. That's something.
Yeah, that's a thing that happened. It sure did wake me up for 2 seconds.
I forget what the plot is at this point. They're looking for the big dog.
Yeah, they're looking for the big dog, and they're trying to figure out what's going on with it. Or at least John is, because it turns out Sherlock only went in there because he found out that this other stupid case he brought up at the start that didn't matter about a bunny. It turns out
they got, because John Watson's WordPress blog has a ask box where people can, you know, leave messages.
And this little girl said, you need to help me with my bunny. She started glowing and then she disappeared. And it turns out that Sherlock's only come into this highly like secure military base to find this little girl's mum, who is a scientist, and accuse her of stealing and killing this bunny.
Which she did, because she somehow accidentally brought home a lab rat, essentially. Because she got mixed up, because she kept the pet bunnies in the same room as the glow-in-the-dark bunnies.
Yeah, Dr. Stapleton's not the smartest, and as is everyone, because no one can be smart if Sherlock is going to be smart. Basically, they get caught on the way out, because obviously they do. And then this guy...
This is a really obnoxious scene where you can like see like the message go out from this military base, and like it's traveling from person to person until it reaches Mycroft in some gentleman's club or whatever. And like, you know, it's cutting and there's text on the screen, and it's like, oh, that's a cool trick, but you know...
The text on the screen is done really badly because it doesn't track with the person, and it's on a white background with white text.
Oh, that's different. That's when Sherlock gets the text from...
It happens multiple times.
Yeah. It's so weird that a trick that they came up with, they can't even do it properly, where they'll put white text on a white background. And it's like, this is your trick. You should be able to do it properly.
But yeah, they get caught, and then this doctor who works there, who's a different doctor to the one with the bunny, Dr. Frankland, is like, oh yeah, I recognise you, Mycroft, how you doing? And gets them out, and they aren't suspicious about that at all. They don't find that weird that this guy is just cool with getting them out of there. And then they have some like funny lines that I will admit are funny, like when John asks, so like, hey, what's going on? And Sherlock just puts his fucking coat collar up, and he's like, don't do that. Don't be all mysterious with your cheekbones. Like, I don't do that, he says as he snuggles into his coat collar. I mean, again, the actors are both very good at what they're doing.
There are some bits in this show that are like, you understand why they became gift sets on Tumblr.
You can understand why people really connected to it, because the potential was clearly being met in one or two scenes.
Yeah.
Again, really funny line. The next scene when Sherlock and John go to Henry's house, and it's a huge fucking mansion. And
I love this house. I want to live there because it's this weird, you know, traditional
cottage,
big cottage, and then it has like this sort of like weird modern bits just slammed on it with like, you know, glassed in kind of
like a big
fancy
conservatory that's like all ivy covered and like old timey.
It's a gorgeous house. I want to live there.
I really wonder what the set was. Like, that had to have been like a therapist's building or something. There's no way that was someone's house.
But anyway, the funny line
was John comes in and sees this giant fucking house, and he just goes, are you rich? And he goes, oh yeah, That was like, the whole bit.
It's great. It's very
Understated, which is what they're bad at.
yeah.
Like, their plan to find out what's happening with this dog, because they haven't made any progress yet, is to go and re-traumatize Henry by dragging him back to the spot where it all happened, which is the one spooky hollow in the whole of the fucking country.
Devil's butthole.
Yeah, the devil's whatever. And Henry's like, hey, I don't want to do that. And Sherlock's like, well, too bad, because it's my plan, so we're going to do it. And they go there, and they have a pretty good eerie atmosphere for a bit, which does not last, unfortunately. Like,
I mean, it's like it's like one of the UK's top spooky filming locations. I'm pretty sure we've seen this in exact same bit of Devon. Yeah. Is it in Devon?
I have no idea. This episode's in Devon.
But anyway, I'm pretty sure I've seen this bit in Merlin and other places.
I mean, odds are it's probably in Wales because it's cheaper to film there. But basically, their whole plan is to go and like find this dog. They get separated for a bit. John sees some Morse code that he writes down, and that turns out to really not go anywhere later.
It literally is nothing. It's barely even a joke at the end.
I mean, this is one of the bits you remembered, which was, it turns out that it's not someone flashing Morse code, it's some people dogging, and they're hitting the lights on their car.
You do realize that you're going to have to explain what dogging is to people who aren't
It's having sex
British.
in public in a car. Like, it's a weirdly British thing, but, like, that's what's happening.
Because that confused me, because when I was, like, a teenager, I would watch, the British panel shows on YouTube, and sometimes people would make a joke about dogging, and I had no idea what they were talking about. I could deduce that it was like a sex thing, but I assume, so it's like, is it like when you're having doggy-style sex, but in the park?
I mean, people do what they want.
But no, it's specifically in cars.
Yeah, specifically in cars, and that whole plotline goes nowhere, because, John joins back with the group, and he's missed nothing, so the plot doesn't need that.
We don't even, but the thing is, we don't find out that it was nothing until later, so we see him writing down some Morse code. Yeah. And then we go to the rest of the scene.
Yeah. I did make note of one line where Henry says, like, to Sherlock, he says, he's a pretty straightforward bloke, and you, and then he just trails off. And it's like, yeah, I can understand that. Yeah. Like, it does kind of give that autism vibe of, like, you don't quite hit that natural, like, casual tone that I'm expecting from you, but I don't want to say anything in case it offends you. And that's pretty common. But yeah, the dog shows up, and they all freak the fuck out.
Oh, but it doesn't show up because the thing is that, is it Watson who doesn't see it?
Watson doesn't see it, but Sherlock does, and he completely loses his mind.
Yeah, he freaks the flips his fucking lid.
Yeah, literally, Watson's like really concerned about Henry because obviously he genuinely has trauma related to this. And
he's like sobbing on the ground.
Like, has a full shutdown, and Sherlock just runs off into the woods and leaves them both there because he's an absolute ass.
He just leaves his best friend and this random guy to get eaten by a monster dog.
Yeah, and Watson actually acts like a doctor here for the first time ever, and maybe the only time ever, where he like actually sits down with Henry and makes sure he's okay. And then they have a weird, bad, like, Star Wars-esque crossfade between Sherlock setting out a fire and John talking to Henry.
Oh, yeah, because it's like, sort of like, they sort of cut Benedict Cumberbatch's profile into the picture. So it's like one side of the screen is Henry freaking out, and then one side is like Sherlock
shutting down, like he's not really reacting at this point.
And it's not really a transition because they hold on that bit for like several seconds.
It looks really bad.
It looks very bad.
But yeah, Watson eventually catches up with Sherlock, who's just sitting staring into a fire like he's...
in the pub.
In the pub, he's just sitting staring into the fire like he's lost his mind. And he's like clearly shaking and not like able to focus, and he's drinking, which is not a thing he really does.
He's like rubbing, his temples and like closing his eyes and clearly is like out of it.
Yeah, he's like clearly like having hyperventilation and like just having a full-on panic attack. Watson does not fucking notice.
He doesn't seem to notice at all or even acknowledge that, like, not even so much as, are you okay? He's just like starts talking about the case or whatever, like, oh, well, I noticed some Morse code earlier. Meanwhile, his friend is like over there like,
I mean, if you've ever seen any pictures from Sherlock of people making fun of it, it's probably from this scene because Benedict Cumberbatch is doing some very exaggerated acting, which this scene definitely calls for, but when you freeze frame it, he does make some pretty funny faces.
My favourite face is the one where he says hound, but like you can see all his teeth at the same time.
Yeah, like, there's a lot of one, like, I don't want to be
like he looks like that gritting teeth emoji.
Oh,
With,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
with the big eyes.
I mean, I don't want to be mean about Benedict Cumberbatch's appearance or his name, because he's a fairly chill guy, and if you want to actually see something he's good in, listen to Cabin Pressure.
I see something he's good in, listen to a radio show.
I mean, yeah.
No, Cabin Pressure is really good. Listen to Cabin Pressure.
Yeah, listen to Cabin Pressure anyway. I do want to talk about him, I know. I know who you're thinking about, and I do want to talk about him, but I wanted to save it until I had a chance to re-listen.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to see Benedict Cumberbatch's actual... Because he's a very talented actor, especially in comedy, and unfortunately he doesn't really get to do that anymore because of this show where he's been typecast ever since.
Yeah.
But basically at this point, Sherlock's trying to explain why he doesn't have feelings, and he's saying stuff like, I've always been able to keep myself distant, and Watson replies, all right, Spock. And we both screamed at each other like, Jesus Christ, are you trying to lay it on this thick? Like, Spock is such a fucking well-known autistic character, or autistic coded character, I mean, that it's like, it feels really intentional, and this episode feels like it has a lot of intentional moments where they draw that comparison but try and make it seem like a negative as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like, Sherlock has no feelings. Sherlock is a dick because he's autistic. And my issue with that is, like, there are people who are horrible who are autistic because they are people. But to say that that excuses them being terrible people is bad. Like... I'm thinking
of that meme now. Yeah, I'm mean. Yeah, I'm autistic. We exist.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm a perfect person as someone who is autistic, and I think you have to be able to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
Like,
but implying that someone is shitty because they are, not elastic is bad.
And also the thing of, like, well, his shittiness is completely excused because he's autistic. Also bad. Both things are bad.
Well, with Sherlock, the implication is very much that his shittiness is okay because he's smart, which is such a, big trope. Like, you will have this character who is, a genius, and they treat everyone around them like garbage, but somehow it's okay because the only reason they treat people shittily is because they're smart. And it's like, I don't know that tracks. Most people who are, like, genuinely intelligent are usually pretty nice. Yeah. It's the people who think they're very intelligent are assholes. Mm-hmm. But the people who, you talk, if when you talk to someone and think, wow, this person is really smart, they're usually also chill. I've never talked to a person who I've been like, wow, this person is smart, but they're also a piece of shit. Never happened.
At least in my experience. And I don't want to say I'm an intelligent person because I feel like it's all relative or whatever. And there are many things I'm not good at. But I think there is always a thing of, like, they have the capacity to try and be considerate. Even if it doesn't come to them naturally. People will always have that capacity to try and be considerate. And in this show, they make a very big point of Sherlock doesn't need to try because he's just so useful and cool that it doesn't matter. He doesn't need to try and make people like him because he's too useful. And it's bad. And this whole scene, there's a lot more of that kind of, like, autistic coding. Like, there's this whole bit where he's, like, hyper-focused on analysing this random guy who sits across the room because he wants to prove that he's still functioning and he still works properly. And it's like, hun, you're just going in a panic spiral. I've been there. I've been there when I've been so panicked that I just info dump a bunch of stuff about a random podcast that no one else listens to. I've been there. But, like, they have that line that everyone makes fun of. I guess people who ship it liked, where he says, I don't have friends, but he really pushes that F hard.
Yeah, I don't want to do it because by the way, we have a microphone now.
Yeah, can you tell about the audio quality?
But it doesn't have a filter on it, so I'm afraid if we overdo the F, it's going to be very bad ear feel.
Yeah, and it's going to be a spit microphone, so we don't need that.
But he F's the F out of that F.
Yeah, and he overacts it so much that a lot of people freeze frame that, where he's got, like, 8 chins.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's kind of low blow to insult his face when he's trying to do an overacting moment.
Like, it's so weird that the people who are fans of him are so mean about his appearance.
Yeah,
at the same time as they also think he's hot. It's a bit confusing. I wonder what it's like to have people say you're hot and then also make fun of you for having your face.
Yeah, but also, like, John is not a good person in this scene either.
No.
Because Sherlock's clearly having a mental breakdown at this point.
Yeah,
There's
he's,
no better word for it.
Losing his shit. And John, who's supposed to be his friend...
literally responds to, I don't have friends with, yeah, I wonder why. And then he walks off and they don't see each other for fucking a whole day.
Like...
everyone is bad in this scenario and no one deserves happiness.
No one's the good guy in this. Because I remember being in the fandom back then, like, and thinking that, John and Sherlock have this, like, bond between them, and, like, they understand each other better than everyone else. And then you actually watch the show, and it's like, these people act like they're all complete strangers with no attachment to each other all the way through.
Yeah.
They don't understand the first thing about each other.
Basically, a whole bunch of stuff happens after this. It's not really relevant to our reading, because Sherlock's not in it for a little bit. John goes and finds out about the dogging. Henry has a breakdown that's like a Saw movie for some reason. I don't know why they have this scene.
Yes, is this the thing where like his lights are turning on?
Yeah, I don't know why this scene's here.
I don't think we find out what that was in the end. Is he hallucinating or is someone trying to drive him insane?
Assumption is hallucinating, but it's really not clear. It's pointless, except for Russell Tovey's wonderful acting. Again, he's really good. I'm sorry he had to be in this. John,
sure, he got paid.
John tries to interrogate Henry's therapist and completely...
Very badly. He tries to like flirt with her and pretend like, you know, I'm flirting with you, but I'm also really interesting to talk about your patients, but like in a sexy way.
Yeah.
Like, hey baby, do you know any people who suffer from traumatic hallucinations in their childhood? That's my kink.
Oh god, it's so bad. And also like the thing of like they try and turn it into like a soft moment because at the end he's like, yeah, and I might be having a friend who's having the same problem, a friend who I'm currently ignoring and not talking to.
I assume that he was just straight up lying there because she's like, why are you asking me about my patients in like setting?
They play the like music sting that's supposed to be the sad Sherlock music sting, so I'm assuming he's supposed to be sincere, but honestly,
but he's clearly just trying to get information out of her, so it's like I don't buy it.
That all gets ruined anyway. He gets nowhere with it
because the Professor
Franklin
Dr. Franklin
comes
up and is like, "Hello, Dr. Watson. How's it going with the case? Have you solved the mystery of the Hound?" And blah 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 blah.
It's so obvious he's the bad guy.
And
even if you haven't read the book,
the therapist is like, well, fuck you.
Turns out I shouldn't break my oath of patient confidentiality just so I can fuck this extremely average man. Like,
that's the lesson we've learned here today, folks.
Yeah. Sherlock's on a rock again. I don't know why they keep showing this shot. It's so stupid.
Is it the same shot or is it?
It's a different shot, but it's the same principle.
Is it the same rock?
I think it is the same rock. He then shows up at Henry's and he's like, "Oh, you've got damp," and he like tries to distract him by being really weird and high energy. And he makes
They play the triumphant like music to make us feel like something is happening, but it's literally just fucking around in this guy's kitchen making a cup of coffee.
Yeah, he makes John a cup of coffee that has sugar in it. This is plot relevant, but to be honest, it was so boring. I literally
No, because you're mixing it up because that happens later.
No, he has to do it there because it has to.
No, yeah, he takes the sugar. This is the thing. He takes the sugar from Henry's house.
Yeah. Blah blah blah. Basically, they have this whole reunion scene now, where it's John and Sherlock have this reunion scene, and a lot of stuff is said that's really dumb. Stuff like Sherlock says he felt doubt for the first time in his life, apparently, which is not true.
Also, that's not good scientific principle, is it?
Really isn't. Also, he starts being like, I was trying to be funny, and John's like, funny really doesn't suit you. Stop. And he has the massively overblown thing of like,
I meant what I said before. I don't have friends. I've just got one. And then he says then the fandom gifted.
Yeah, and then afterwards he says the quote thing of like, as a conductor of light, you are unbeatable.
It doesn't fit because they like quote it word for word in this like modern retelling, and it's like, why are you talking like a fucking Shakespeare poem out of nowhere?
Yeah, it's really wordy, and also like Sherlock is like trying to compliment him but is accidentally insulting him. And I think this is like the closest to the actual autism experience of his rudeness that I think you get from him in this episode, where he's like trying to be nice, but because he doesn't have that grasp on, you know, empathy, he doesn't understand that what he's saying is a very backhanded compliment.
Yeah.
And I think John also shows that he understands that he doesn't mean it in a mean way.
Yeah, that's like the one time he doesn't like blow up on Sherlock.
It's the one time he doesn't like call Sherlock out for being shitty. Because he's like, oh, I know you didn't mean it this time. It's like, why are you okay with it the rest of the time then? What is wrong with you people? Basically, at this point, Mycroft got really pissed of Sherlock using his card, so he sends Detective Lestrade down.
I said this at the time, because, again, it's been so long since I watched this episode. I watched this when I was like 14, 15-ish, and now I'm, you know, at the ripe old age of 25. I fully realised that Rupert Grint, isn't it?
Rupert Graves. Rupert Grint is Ron from Harry Potter.
Shit. What was his name?
Rupert Graves.
Graves. He's hot.
I'm not going to call you out on the podcast, but you have a type, and that type
I have several types, I'll have you know.
You have a type that's specifically the Lestrade stereotype, though. And
yeah.
I don't mean in looks, I mean specifically a narrative role.
Yeah, I love the dumb detective character. But anyway, but separately, Rupert Graves is very attractive in this. And so Lestrade shows up at the pub with his, like, you know, fucking casual vacay wear and this pair of like
Tanned
pilot
as hell.
sunglasses. And it's like, oh, sup guys? I'm just here on holiday. Don't worry about it.
And they're like, you obviously were just on holiday. Like, it's tanned as hell, and this is
Oh
Devon.
no, there's a bit where he goes like, oh hi John, and John goes, oh hi Greg. This is the other really funny bit in in this episode where Sherlock is, deducing all this stuff. Oh, you're not on holiday because you got a suntan and all this other stuff. And like, obviously you were sent here by Mycroft. Is that why you're using that stupid secret name, Greg? And John goes, that's his name.
Like, the Greg thing is really funny, and it is based on a Sherlock Holmes thing where, like, Conan Doyle never kept track of any fucking canon at all. So we know Lestrade's name started with a G, and that's all we got. So it literally does change a lot.
Just like Watson's wife.
Just like Watson's wife.
And Mrs. Hudson is...
And Mrs. Hudson.
Oh.
Don't read these books if you care about continuity, that's all I'm saying. But basically, it's one of the few points in the episode where you feel like, oh god, genuine energy and excitement.
There's like a really great like three-way dynamic between the three of them there.
Again, all the actors are great, and unfortunately not very well utilised in this. They have a whole subplot where they finally get Lestrade to help them find out that the people who are running the inn were keeping a dog as part of like trying to keep local tourism up because everyone believes there's this ghost dog on the moors. And they basically admit, oh yeah, we had a dog, but we put it down because it wasn't safe. So they realise maybe that was the dog at one point, but there's something else now because we saw it after the dog was apparently put down. This is the point where Sherlock gives John his cup of tea.
Or coffee.
Coffee. And he knows that John doesn't take sugar, but he puts sugar in anyway, and John, trying to be polite, just drinks it anyway because he's not used to Sherlock being nice to him.
And he shouldn't be because...
Yeah, he shouldn't.
This is a trap.
This is definitely a trap. This is the point where we go to the line that I think kind of made me decide that this was the episode I wanted to talk about. Because it just... I remember at the time it really struck me as something that was like, oh god, this doesn't... Wait, is this okay? Like, this doesn't seem okay. Because Greg Lestrade walks out and he's like, oh, it's nice to have the gang back together. It's like nice having all the same faces together. It appeals to his... And then Watson supplies Asperger's.
Cool. They're such good friends.
They're such great friends. And it's like, why would you bring that up in this story unless you were going to do anything with it? Like, why even bring up the word, specifically Asperger's as well, which, by the way, has fallen out of favour and shouldn't really be used that widely, because its origins are fucked. But
real fucked.
Yeah, it's the thing of, like, they bring that up and they're like, oh, we're just humouring his need for everyone to be together, even though he treats everyone like shit. It's like, it makes no sense, and it just felt really mean-spirited in a way I couldn't pin down at the time, and I kind of looked the other way because I really liked the show and I wanted to enjoy it still, and to be honest, it should have been a warning sign for me. Like, it's dumb, and then, like, it goes on to a scene where Sherlock straight up tortures John.
Okay, is there anything else that happens in between there? Because I think this requires some setup. Because
I mean, they go back into Baskerville because...
which is a laboratory, I don't think we mentioned that before.
Yeah, it's a laboratory, it's a secret government laboratory, but like...
In Devon.
And like, they sneak in, but they don't sneak in this time because Mycroft pulled some strings after apparently being really pissed about Sherlock sneaking in. He's now fine with legitimately letting him in.
Yeah.
For no reason. But they go back into it and like, they see this lab that used to have all these animals in it, but now it has a bunch of empty cages and
yeah, they're exploring and they get separated for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So John is in this big empty cage room alone. Mm-hmm. And because all the scientists just walked out into the corridor for some reason.
Yeah, reasons he doesn't question.
And then all the lights go out and like an alarm start blaring and the doors aren't letting him out anymore. And then he hears is this when he hears the dog growling?
Yeah, he hears the dog growling.
And he is like losing his shit because he thinks it's the Baskerville monster dog that they made in this laboratory. So he hides in a cage, like with like a tarp over it, and it's like calling Sherlock, and it's like, it's here, oh, it's gonna get me or whatever.
Like, clearly terrified, clearly like he's going to die.
Yeah. And Sherlock is like, oh, where are you? What can you see? And like, as the conversation goes on, it becomes very clear that Sherlock is mainly concerned with, can you see the dog? Not so much can you hear it, like, can you see it? Mm-hmm. And
this comes back later.
It comes back later, but...
Long story short, John is genuinely really traumatized by this. They don't linger on it because they never linger on it.
Yeah, like he's suddenly like the lights turn back on and Sherlock is like, outside the cage and pulls the tarp back and is like, "Oh, are you okay?" or whatever, and helps him out. And
John is
freaking out, and that also very memeable moment where he screams, "No, it's not okay. I saw it. I was wrong," type of thing. But he's screaming.
And then Sherlock very smugly is like, "Actually,
we didn't see it. None of us saw it."
And he does a plot point that was so poorly conveyed, I literally didn't understand it until I watched the episode a second time. Where, like, he's testing the sugar because he thinks that Harry Knight's sugar was the thing that has been drugging them because he's convinced it's all a drug hallucination. And it turns out it's not the sugar. And he has a weird Mind Palace moment, which is the dumbest fucking thing they ever do.
You should probably explain the Mind Palace before we...
Oh, I don't want to, but...
You have to.
Oh, God. So Mind Palace is an actual memory technique. And it's kind of tangentially mentioned in the books, but it's essentially a thing of, like, if you're trying to get better at remembering things, you try and lay out what you're trying to remember in physical space. So it's easy for you to associate, like, next to the door is this, so it's related to this memory. It's like a very good technique if you're the kind of person who thinks spatially. I'm not, but there is some benefit to doing it. In the original Sherlock Holmes, he literally describes it as, there's an attic, you've got some stuff in it, sometimes you need to clear stuff out. That's his extent of that, because Mind Palace as a concept didn't exist yet. The way that BBC Sherlock does that is by having Sherlock fucking mime a bunch of random words around his face.
Yeah, he's like flinging his hands around and the
like,
text appears on the screen.
And occasionally they'll show him like going through a building in his mind, which I think is closer to the thing that they're actually trying to describe, but it's still bad and it's still dumb. And in this version, he just looks utterly insane.
Oh yeah, there's a bit. So he's just tested the sugar, and the scientist lady with the rabbit and John are there.
Stapleton.
And basically he just like throws this woman out of her own laboratory, and she just goes because Sherlock is an asshole to everyone, but somehow everyone always listens to him and just obeys him blindly. So he just sends them out so he can be alone in this laboratory and wave his hands about as he's thinking about the word hound and the words that Henry remembered
with Liberty
Inn, and looking through breeds of dogs. And singing a bit of
Hound
Elvis
Dog.
Presley.
Yeah. So dumb. It looks so stupid.
I love that, like, watching it again, realizing that most of it is just, like, the word hound or liberty. The word liberty written in different fonts. And that's, like, the majority of the scene.
Yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad. And honestly, it's only entertaining in an ironic way.
Yeah.
I think you can just laugh at it. I don't think you can enjoy it sincerely anymore. I think we've kind of gotten past that point as a species. Basically, he figures out that hound is a bunch of letters instead of like a word.
That it's an acronym.
And that Liberty Inn is for Liberty, Indiana. Where he gets this from, nobody fucking knows. He just invents it.
He's attuned to every data point.
Basically, they hack into the mainframe
of this secret laboratory
after wasting a fucking 5-minute scene figuring out the password because it's a Thatcherite who runs the base, and they realise his password's Maggie.
I forgot about that bit.
It's really dumb.
Oh,
it's like Sherlock's so smart. It's like he literally had 8 pictures of Margaret Thatcher in the room.
5 different biographies.
And the only reason that Thatcher didn't work was because it was too long. Of course, the password was goddamn Margaret.
No, Maggie.
Maggie, not Margaret, because Margaret was too long. So that was what it actually was. Yeah,
so they find out that this was like a secret mind drug experiment in America, and the Hound acronym was like the last names of the people involved in it.
Yeah.
And they made like little like t-shirts for their like secret, mind control experiment with like a dog on it. Like it's like an ice hockey team.
Yeah, it's so dumb.
So good.
The thing is, that's relevant.
No, yeah, that they had fucking custom made t-shirts for their secret government experiments.
It's crazy that that's relevant.
I wonder if all American, secret government science experiments do that. It's like the mind control one, the one where they try to like militarize dolphins. Did they have t-shirts with like dolphins with like guns or something?
God, I'm imagining what was it? The dolphin LSD one, and it's just like the designs for that must have been wild.
That would have been a great t-shirt, like sort of like a tie-dye shirt with like sort of like white silhouette of a dolphin, and I don't know, maybe like it's got like sort of like silhouette of its brain as well, and it's like ooh, brainwaves.
Manhattan Project's logo is just the word regret.
Or not regret, because
yeah, the word regret with a question mark in quotation marks. Mm-hmm. It's very thoughtful. But basically what's happening is Henry has had a full-on break with reality. Like, he doesn't know what's happening anymore. He just doesn't feel...
He's hallucinating, like, full on, like, that he's, like, being attacked by this dog in a cornfield or something.
Yeah, he almost kills his therapist with a gun, but he doesn't know what he's doing. He's very much having a break with reality, and he goes back to the spooky hollow that they went to at the start. Supposedly to kill this dog, or maybe kill himself. They don't know.
No, he puts the gun in his mouth, so it's very much kill himself.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is when they get there, but they don't know why he went there. They assume it was to end it all where it started, or some stupid dramatic thing. So they go there with Lestrade, who has a gun, which is apparently his only marketable skill in this team.
Well, why does he have a gun anyway? Because he's like
he's a British cop on vacation.
Yeah, why does he have a gun? Is it because he was sent by the government?
I mean, maybe, who knows? Why does John have a gun? He definitely shouldn't.
Crimes.
But yeah, they go there and they realise, they unlock everything and they realise...
I want to talk about this bit where, Henry is, has a gun in his mouth. And this is like the one time where Sherlock actually shows some tact. Like, showing that he could have done that all along. Mm-hmm. Like, it's only when it's, like, literally stopping this guy from killing himself.
Because, or germane to the thing he's solving, because apparently that's the only thing he cares about.
But not even, because sometimes he's an asshole to people who they're trying to get information out of. So this is like I think it's basically the writers realizing that if he was being a cunt to this guy who is, like, suicidal, it would make him look, like, irredeemably bad.
Yeah. And basically, when they're standing in this fog, they're like, what happened, Henry, was you repressed what actually happened. And instead of a dog mauling your dad to death, it was a man
with a t-shirt with a dog on it. Is this foreshadowing for the final episode? Where someone gets their memories wiped and remembers a person as a dog?
God, so stupid.
Hannah, don't you see? It was genius all along.
It was all intentional. It wasn't a total bullshit. Oh, God, don't talk to me. We're going to have to talk about Eurus at some point, and I don't know if I'm capable of it, to be honest. I don't know if I had the capacity.
I want to talk about Eurus. But anyway.
But yeah, they basically come up with a whole bunch of bullshit about repressed memories, which is definitely not how any of that works. But why would he repress, like, how he died, but not the fact he died? It makes no sense. But
why is it less traumatic to remember your dad being killed by a giant monster dog with glowing red eyes than just a guy in a t-shirt
who open palm slapped him to death? Because to be honest, that fight scene was pretty bad.
just camera shaking, and this guy is going. This guy in like a 3-piece suit and a gas mask is like sitting over like astride this man and just like slapping him in the chest with his open palm.
Very stupid.
Like drumming him to death.
And then Sherlock's like, oh God, he's here again, the guy in the gas mask, and they pull it off, and it's Moriarty.
And he's like mugging for the camera and like shaking his head around, like being really... I forget, what's his name again? Mr. Moriarty actor.
Andrew Scott.
He really is throwing himself into this role, but I hate his performance so much as Moriarty. I forgot how utterly obnoxious it is.
Yeah, he's directed really poorly. He's written terribly. If you want to see him in anything, see him in Fleabag, because that is the highlight of his career. Easy.
Like, just the way he talks and the way he is like constantly mugging for the camera.
And the weirdly hyper-gay coding they go with for him at all times. Like, there's never a point where he's on camera.
Like, I need to clarify, I don't think he's a bad actor. I think he's poorly directed into a performance that is like literally one of the most obnoxious things I've seen on a television screen. Even
if he wasn't poorly directed, he has such non-content to work with, because a bunch of other stuff happens. They find out.
It should be clear that this is a hallucination. This is Sherlock hallucinating that it's Moriarty.
Yeah, Moriarty's not actually there. A running theme for this show where they don't know what to do when Moriarty's not around, so they just invent reasons for him to still be around.
But he isn't really around. It's all a lie.
Yeah, It turns out that the crazy gas, which they refuse to, talk about in any real detail, because why would you need to, is activated by pressure plates on the ground around this hollow.
Because Sherlock snaps out of his, hallucination state and realizes that it's the
fog
professor.
It's the professor who's using the fog to make them all too afraid to stop.
Like the guy he's holding on to isn't Moriarty. It's Mr. Professor Frankford. Frankland. Whatever. And they really brush over the fact that it's like, for some reason, this guy who wants to continue the mind control gas experiments set them up in the middle of the forest
where people bring tourists
and he put pressure plates on the
grass
in the dirt,
which apparently have aerosol cans of crazy gas, and no one talks about how cartoonish that is. Like, this show really fucking, I don't know how it's skated by criticism for so long, because it is just cartoonish and bad. And basically they chase Dr. Franklin and he fucking runs into a minefield and immediately blows himself up.
He steps on a mine and it goes click, and then he goes, fuck it, and lifts his foot and just blows himself to bits.
It's so stupid. And again, it ruins the tone. I mean, I'm not going to go into it too much, but it ruins the tone of the whole Hound of the Baskervilles, which is a really classic gothic novel. So, you know, the whole moors being like endless and not knowing if anybody in there will get out ever again and being lost in the fog is kind of the tone they're going for. Not, let's have a giant firework explosion where we kill the main character. Like,
not the main, but the main villain.
The main villain, I mean. Like, it's so against what this story is. It's ridiculous and awful.
It is a weird choice for modernizing this story, where they will take things that aren't really like specifically Victorian, like they could be at any time, and they replace them with technology. Like, the dog is mind control gas that is activated by pressure plates. The moors is a minefield. Whatever the Baskerville is in the original is a secret.
Henry is Baskerville. His name is Henry Baskerville. The base isn't called Baskerville.
Is there a secret military base in the original story?
Absolutely not.
But
at least I don't think literally, we just watched this and I don't remember it properly. I'm pretty sure he's called Henry Baskerville. I don't know what the base is called. I might have got it backwards. Maybe the base is called Baskerville. No, it is, isn't it? See, this is how bad this episode is. I literally don't remember. His name is Henry Knight. Why not? But, like, you can hear me rustling through my notes. Like, what the fuck even happened? But, yeah, it's bad. And then they had, like, this little button ending where, like, they talk about the fact that there was a real dog and that the dog that the two people who owned the inn had was really there at the end because they couldn't kill it. And then they kill that dog and they have the imaginary...
they brush over... So they're basically hallucinating that this actual dog, is the monster dog, and they just fire bullets into it. And then it turns out, they cut to them snapping out of it, and just like a normal dog dead on the ground. And they kind of brush over the fact that they just slaughtered this poor animal for no reason.
Yeah, it's weird. They can't focus on the fact these people aren't good people. But yeah, Sherlock says, oh yes, I see. I understand why I didn't kill the dog. And John goes, no, you don't. Is it sentiment? Yeah, sentiment. It's like, I'm sorry, but Sherlock would have heard of the concept of sentiment.
He's supposed to be a detective. He doesn't understand that people like their dogs.
Yeah, it's
like
really
it is. Surely
awful.
part of being a detective is being able to figure out motive.
Yeah.
It doesn't track. It's not even that funny, so I don't know why it's here.
Yeah, and like, Sherlock insists that he won't get stuff wrong again because he got it wrong this time. He thought that the sugar was poisoned, and then you wonder, wait, why was he so convinced that the sugar was poison? He didn't have any evidence for that. And then they cut to what happened earlier when John was being tortured, because Sherlock did that to him on purpose.
Yeah, like he basically intentionally, I guess, orchestrated this whole thing with everyone in the laboratories to have them like get out of the room, and then turn the lights off and lock the doors and like turn the alarm on, and then like through the intercom like pipe in dog growling noises, and he's like just sitting there in the surveillance security room, just like all casual, like, oh, what's up, John? Where are you? Almost like taking pleasure in mentally torturing his friend.
He really feels like he's 5 seconds off giggling because he finds it so fun to hear John be like, I'm gonna die in here. And he's like, I'm coming, John. And he just presses the intercom button to play more dog noises. Utterly, like, the whole I'm a high-functioning sociopath thing set back the understanding of a lot of mental health stuff a long way. But Sherlock genuinely is sociopathic, but he makes no efforts to improve himself or to try and learn a capacity for empathy.
Yeah, like, that's the thing. Like, not understanding emotions doesn't mean that you're automatically like a shitty, mean person. Like, that doesn't track at all.
Yeah, I mean, just to compare, and I mean, we had to fit in one fucking comparison, didn't we?
I've been fighting so hard not to bring that up, and if you're bringing it up now,
data.
Obviously, it's data. Like a Star Trek tangent. We're gonna go on a Star Trek tangent. Data in Star Trek Next Gen's whole thing is that he doesn't have emotions, which, you know, but
you can argue that, but whatever.
He doesn't have emotions.
He doesn't experience
but
them,
the way that manifests isn't that he is uncaring or shitty to people. He's like the kindest, most thoughtful, most like
compassionate.
Makes so much of an effort to be nice to everything and everyone. He's like the character who will like look at, you know, the ship is caught in like this weird, river of incorporeal microbe aliens, and everyone else is like, oh, but we should go to warp and kill them all. And Data is like, well, they're life forms, so that seems kind of, against the Prime Directive. Like, he is the most compassionate, kind person.
Like, he constantly makes decisions that don't benefit him, but they benefit others.
Yeah.
Like, there's stuff he does that genuinely could have brought him happiness that he decides against because it would have harmed others. And, like, a lot of that you can try and, like, if you want to ignore all the sentimentality of Data, which I refuse to, I love him dearly and I think he is great, but I think in this case you can talk about how being kind to other people, even if you don't really get it, is the path of least resistance in most situations.
Yeah.
Like, there is no reason you would be openly antagonistic to people if you understand how you're being antagonistic, when it would not benefit you in any way.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't benefit Sherlock to be a dick to people.
He's a detective. He should, like, by all means, like, try to be, endear himself to other people so he can get information out of them.
Yeah, and most of the people he works with hate him. Most people he's around don't seem to want to spend time with him. And it does bother him, but he also doesn't care enough to do anything about it. We're kind of getting to the sum up point of this episode. It is over, thank fuck. But long story short, don't watch this. I would say don't watch this. Like, if you want to entertain yourself, there are 1,000 better versions of Hound of the Baskervilles. Not Hounds of the Baskerville. Hounds of Baskerville. It's nothing. It was the final straw for me was the fucking title. But, like...
I love that about you.
I already had so much apathy towards this, and this kind of broke me. But, like, if there are so many better campy versions, or silly versions, or straight versions, or whatever... that you can enjoy. This version's just not very good. It's not easy to follow. There's long, boring stretches. I mean, I don't know about you, because you weren't really in the fandom in the same way as me, but, like, the only benefit I got from it was, like, those kind of nostalgic, oh, I remember everyone talking about that.
Not with this episode, because this is, like, the one of the episodes that the fandoms don't really talk that much about, like, aside from, like, the few moments that are, like, shipping fodder. Like, I just came to realize, like, wow, there's so much dead space in this episode that no one really cared about.
Yeah, it's truly, like, a cop-out for the most of it. And unless you really want to revisit it, unless you're someone who loves Sherlock Holmes and want to see every version of it, which, why would you do that to yourself, man? Honestly. But, like, I would say you could probably not watch this. It's not even really entertaining in a funny way. It's mostly boring. And as it goes as an autism read, it's not a very good thing to relate to. Mostly on the basis of Sherlock Holmes is a bad person, which autistic people can be. And I'm sure we will talk about some bad people or people who've done bad things who fall on the spectrum in terms of analysis. That's not necessarily inherently bad. I want to make that really clear. Like, yeah. I think there's nothing inherently bad with having an autistic person in your story who is a bad person. Because that does happen. That is a present thing. But, like, the way they talk about Sherlock is, like, his badness is a direct consequence of his autism. And it's not his fault. And even if it is his fault, it doesn't matter because he's too smart for us to ever hold him accountable for that. And that's not okay. Like, it, as a piece of representation, it just makes it seem like, well, if an autistic person is mean to you, it's fine. It's like, no, it's not. It's not fine.
I guess we should also make clear that I think the creators have come out and said that, oh no, Sherlock isn't autistic because no one would want a story about an autistic person. Who was it that said that?
Stephen Moffat. And I can't remember if it was autistic or asexual, but either way, he was just calling me out directly, like both barrels. But yeah, it's the thing of, like...
I think it was asexual, but...
It was asexual. I think it was Benedict Cumberbatch who said this stuff about autistic, which I take with a massive pinch of salt. I don't really believe in cancelling people over comments they were made without any prep, especially in stuff this sensitive. I genuinely don't believe that Benedict Cumberbatch has some kind of weird agenda against autistic people, because for one, it would make no sense, but for two, it doesn't really benefit anyone to exclude him from ever, like, addressing this, because he's played other characters who would fit into the spectrum, and I feel like you could make the argument, it's a real person, so I don't really want to armchair diagnose, but, like, when he plays Alan Turing, he brings a lot of, like, autistic characteristics and stuff to his performance, because a lot of people have said that Alan Turing was on the spectrum. And he's clearly capable of showing that respectfully, but the material they have in this show doesn't have any interest in showing it respectfully. A lot of the time they'll show it as a joke, or they'll show it as an excuse for bad behaviour. And it's like, if an autistic person is a bad person, it's not because they're autistic, it's because they suck. You know?
Yeah.
There's so many other versions of Sherlock Holmes, and I'm sure we will talk about some of them. A lot of them are a lot better at this. specifically Elementary, which is a similar like modernizing thing, but in America, where Watson, who's played by Lucy Liu, who is the fucking best. She's so great in that show.
I haven't seen it, but interestingly enough, that was the thing that made me like turn away from Sherlock. Is that in Elementary came out in the hiatus between the season 2 and 3 of Sherlock, and the way the fandom responded to that was just so shitty. Like people were like so tilted about the fact that, you know, they made Watson a woman, and it's obviously just so they can like, you know, make them hook up with each other. And we're definitely not angry that she's Asian. We're not angry about her being Asian. We're not angry about her not being white. Okay, guys, stop.
Ignore the fact that Martin Freeman called her a dog.
And the fandom made excuses for that. But yeah, and so there was obviously a backlash to that, where people were like, hey, you people are being really misogynistic and racist, and also pointing out that the Sherlock the show is also, you know, weirdly misogynistic and racist,
especially against Asian people. Like, Jesus Christ,
like pointing out that the only non-white character, like they're like, how many, like there are there's
the second episode of the first season, which is the one about like the Chinese circus, and the Chinese mafia, I think. So,
and the only like sort of like semi-returning character who isn't white is the Sally Donovan, who is a police officer, basically pointing out that London is weirdly white in this version of Sherlock. And that was the sort of thing that made me go, yeah, you know what, it's kind of iffy that this show just hates women and non-white people, but like in a kind of quiet way.
And will bait gay people for as long as they can get away with.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I think I don't want to be invested in this anymore. And then the next season came out and I just didn't bother.
And that was probably the smart thing to do, because unfortunately I stuck with it until the end of season 3. And then we watched season 4 out of spite together.
Honestly, one of my best memories from university was like the us two, and then the two people we were living with at the time.
Jem, if you're listening, this is a call out to you. This was genuinely one of the best days of my life, was watching Sherlock, the last episode with you.
Oh, it was great. And so we were like watching this episode together, all of us, and the last episode of Sherlock to date. Maybe they'll get another season. 2020 is a hell year, so it could happen. But watching this batshit hell episode together, and just it was like a roller coaster. We were screaming, we were laughing, we were just cursing the screen out.
Like, this was the point where I was starting to understand autism analysis of media. Like, in my undergraduate degree, obviously I couldn't focus on that specifically, but I wrote an essay about how Harry Potter sucks shit in that one specific angle, and I started analysing stuff I was already watching with that angle, and seeing how they handled Sherlock and his sister.
His secret sister
that totally always existed, guys. It was totally planned from the beginning.
It was definitely planned.
But yeah, watching that, I remember screaming and literally slamming my head against our crappy student plastic table so hard that the legs like jumped along the tiling. Like, it was so bad. And honestly, we will probably talk about it at some point. Maybe we'll even be able to find one of our roommates as a guest so we can all scream about it together. But overall, I would say that's the only way you can enjoy this show. Is if you watch it as a hate watch, like you get drunk with some friends, you get some popcorn in, and you watch the last episode of the last season and laugh at how terrible it is.
Is the last episode as fun, though, if you don't have the context of the rest of the show?
Honestly, I think it's funnier because without context, you don't have any of that weird grandeur they pretend they have at this point. Like,
don't watch Dracula, though. That show was more boring. I was hoping to get the same experience I got from watching the final episode of Sherlock, but Dracula is mostly dull.
Yeah, there's not very much confusing to get from. Like, also just skip Stephen Moffat's run of Doctor Who. He has maybe 3 good episodes in his entire run, and honestly, not worth it. Not worth it. I know it's going to make me very unpopular because people still really like his run of Doctor Who, but I'm sorry, he's a bad writer and a bad person.
I don't have an opinion on this because I haven't seen a lot of Doctor Who because Hannah won't let me watch it.
I try, okay? I try.
I've seen some of the new run and I like some of the characters. We haven't finished the last season.
We will get to it. I do want to talk about Ryan.
I love Ryan.
Graham and Ryan are our favourites.
It would be nice if what's her name?
Exactly.
Yeah, they could have like some character development for the female character they wrote.
Yeah, it would be nice if she had like an arc or something, but you know, we can only hope. So long story short, this is a negative on both fronts, and I think this is the first one we have had, and maybe will hopefully be one of the very few ones we'll have where we'll say not entertaining, not a good autism read. But like, it had to be said. It was one of the big ones, and I'm kind of glad we've got it over with, but I'm sure we'll revisit Sherlock Holmes at some point because it's my whole thing.
It's Hannah's thing.
That and Doctor Who, but I've yet to find a character I can talk about from Doctor Who where it's not just going to be like, I don't even know, man, I can't justify this. We won't do Supernatural. I've got some self-respect. I say, knowing I have a Supernatural t-shirt somewhere.
I do not want to watch Supernatural. I've gone this long without watching a single episode of Supernatural.
I wouldn't
do not
take that
have
away from you.
The energy.
So, yeah, battle around, and I'm sorry that you had to endure this with us, but hopefully next week we'll go on to brighter pastures. We haven't exactly decided what we're doing next week yet, but hopefully something a little bit lighter. We will have to wait and see. So, I guess we'll do our outro now, huh?
Yeah.
So this was Spectrum Projection with your hosts Hannah and Tilda. Our theme music is Summer Longing by Tilda, and the art was also by Tilda. I forgot to say that last week. Send us your suggestions for future topics to spectrumprojection@gmail.com. Thanks.
Bye.